Okay, so I was saying that you are looking at how you connect your source code, which is basically in Java, and then you want to connect that source code to a database. In between lies an intermediary or a component called JDBC API. So JDBC as a library provides APIs, and I've said that APIs basically have a set of it's an interface with a set of methods. And of course, with an interface, you don't know about the implementation of methods, but all you know is you know about the method signature, the method name, and the parameters that you must pass to that method, and the order in which you must pass them. We shall look at how we use this API to make a connection to a database. How do we connect to a database while we're in Java? How do we create SQL statements or MySQL statements? For example, like select queries. How do we update? How do we insert? How do we create a database? How do we create a table? All those. Then we shall see how do we execute these queries. Next, we shall look at how we modify resulting records. Of course, viewing has to do with accessing, and modifying has to do with updating, deleting database records. So we are saying fundamentally JDBC is a specification which provides a set of interfaces, and these interfaces, they help you to access a database. For example, you have maybe your source code, your Java program, but you want to connect it to MySQL database, to Postgres, etc. So that's what JDBC will help you with. Of course, you have different Java applications. You have Java applets, you have Java servlets, Java server pages, and enterprise builds. And of course, you have Windows-based applications which can fall under Java applications. So all these you can connect them to database using JDBC. We are saying all of these different executables are able to use JDBC driver to access a database. Now, one thing you need to note here is that when you want to connect your Java program to a database, say MySQL, you have to use a driver. A driver helps, just like you hear of Bluetooth drivers, network drivers. They enable communication between two entities. For example, if it is Bluetooth, maybe it is between your device, and then for you to be able to use Bluetooth, you must have that driver. So the same thing with Java database connectivity. You must have the driver for that specific database that you want to connect to, and it must be a JDBC driver. There are 6 steps involved in building a JDBC application. One, you have to import the packages. Normally the package that we use is java.sql. Okay, as you can see it here, java.sql. So use that driver, use that package to make sure that you can access the interfaces that JDBC provides. Once you've imported the package, please note these steps. Once you've imported the package, you can go ahead and register the driver. So you register the driver, but of course by using source code. It's not like registering online. No, within your source code you must register that driver, and we shall see how we can register that driver. Open a connection. Of course, after you've done that, once you've done that, you open a connection using an interface called driver manager. Driver manager, which has a method, a driver manager interface which has a method called get connection. So you import the package. Next, you register the driver. In the third step, you establish a connection. We call it establishing a connection, and that helps us to create a connection object where we pass, for example, credentials to the database. Once you've opened up a connection, it means that at that point you've established a physical connection with the database. Now, when you've opened up a connection, it means that at that point your Java application is able to communicate to the database. So they are in touch now. They are able to communicate together, and so you can proceed and do whatever you want to. You can go ahead and send requests that you want to send from your Java program to the database. Next is you execute a query. Of course, that your application, I believe you have to perform different queries. Maybe select query. Maybe you need to insert. You need to register a student. Therefore, you expect maybe an insert or an insertion somewhere. You need to update student details. That is update query. It you know them. Delete query, or that. Extract data from the result set. Of course, after you've established connection and executed the query, particularly on the select query, you need to extract data. Maybe you're selecting records from the database. At that point, you expect that you're going to return data, and so you have to extract that data so that you can manipulate or display the information that has been returned from database. And then lastly, you have to explicitly close all the database resources, including the connections, which we call cleaning up the environment. So the steps we've seen: you have to import JDBC packages, which we said in this case it is java.sql, and then you have to register a driver, and then you have to formulating a URL. We shall see how you formulate a URL, and you pass the URL to the get connection method when you're creating a connection object. So I've started with this not so that you can have a background. I didn't want to start from scratch by coding, but I needed you to have these concepts, because I believe the JDBC is a very new concept to you. I believe some of you have not connected Java applications to database, but I thought that these slides would be very important. So we've said you import JDBC package, and as you can see, the package that we've said you must import is java.sql. This one, java.sql. So it's the one that has interfaces, and it is through these interfaces that we access methods which will help you to interact with the database, to make sure that your Java program can interact with the underlying database or the database they're trying to connect to. Why do we import? Of course, when you import, for example, java.sql, you're telling the Java compiler that if, for example, I'm trying to use a specific class, then it comes from that package. Okay, it's like when you are using a specific class, but that class does not exist in your file, in your Java file, then the compiler will not understand where it's coming from. So you have to reference it. And how do you reference? By importing. For example, if you say import java.sql, we have different interfaces. We have driver manager, we have connection class, where we have prepared statement, etc. So with that, we are able to access those classes that will enable us to connect to the database. Registering a JDBC driver. There are two different approaches for registering a driver. The most common one, or the popular one, is class.4name. So what you do in your source code, you write class.4name, then forName as a method takes in the driver name. An example is if you're using MySQL, the driver name is com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. This is when you want to interact with MySQL as your underlying database. But if your underlying database is Postgres or SQL Server or any other database or Oracle, then you have to go ahead and see what is the driver name that I should press inside this method forName as a parameter. So we are saying that this approach of using class forName dynamically loads the class file for the driver into the memory, which automatically registers that driver. They're saying that this method is preferable or is preferred because it allows you to make the driver and registration configurable and portable. You just register driver using one line of code, using one method called for name, and then you pass in the driver name. The second approach is using register driver, which is part of the driver manager interface. And how do you do that? Of course, you have to first create a driver object. For example, if you look at this, my driver is an object for the driver class, and then you say new oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle driver, and then you use a method called driver register driver, which is part of the driver manager interface, and then you pass in the object. So that's another approach of how you can register driver, but normally we use this approach for non-JDK compliant Java virtual machines. But most times, most programs that we build are JDK compliant JVMs. So that's why you find us taking the first approach. But in case you're trying to write a program which is using a non-JDK compliant Java virtual machine, for example, as the one for Microsoft, then the approach that we will use to register the driver is this second approach of where you first create the object for the driver class. What is a driver? Some of you might ask yourselves, what is a driver? A driver, just like we said, it's an intermediary that lies between your Java program and the database, meaning that it helps you to connect your Java source code, your Java program, to the database. So it's like an enabler, okay? And without it, there's no way you can establish communication between your program and the database. So just like you're saying, this is a software component that lets the operating system and the device communicate. That's the driver in this case. It's operating system and the device. If, for example, you want to have Bluetooth connection established between your computer, where you have the operating system, and your phone, okay? So you have an operating system which is on your laptop, and then you have your smartphone. But you want these two devices, your laptop and the device, to communicate with each other, to establish a Bluetooth connection. Then you must have what we call a driver, a Bluetooth driver, which is going to enable the communication happen between these two devices, your laptop and the smartphone. So that is the driver. So the same thing is also applies. The same concept applies to JDBC. JDBC is the driver that enables communication between your Java program and the database. So it helps you. It ensures that your Java programs can, communicate with your database server. Okay, and after you've done that, then you can go ahead and send any SQL commands like select, insert, update, etc. So without a driver, you cannot establish a connection. Okay, forming a database URL. Now, when you're trying to, the third step, we said you have to open a connection. You can see it here. We've looked at how you have to import a package, register a driver, then you have to establish a connection. It's like, I normally use this analogy. I'm speaking to Cato Douglas. I want to speak to Cato Douglas, but Cato Douglas does not know English. Okay, Cato Douglas does not know English, but I know English. So maybe Cato Douglas speaks German or Spanish. What do we need to do? We need to find someone who will interpret our messages. When I need to speak to someone who knows maybe both English and Spanish, so that I speak to that person, and that person will convey my message to Douglas, who knows Spanish. And then Douglas is going to use his Spanish to communicate to that person who knows both languages, and then that person will again come back and talk to me. So that's the concept of a JDBC driver. Now I'm saying that after you've registered the driver, you have to establish a connection. Now establishing connection requires you to form a URL that points to the database server. This database server could be localhost or could be an online database server. So where you're seeing that this URL, it's an address it's an address to your database server. So just like we saw that you create the connection object using the connection class and also the get connection method on the driver manager. So it has it has 3 methods, but these are overloaded methods. If you've done, I think Douglas took you through method overloading, and method overloading is a concept where you have same method name, but what changes the method signature. What do we mean by method signature? The method name and then the number of parameters, and the parameters that the method takes in, and the order also matters. For example, you have get an overloaded method called get connection. There are 3 methods, but they take in different parameters. This one takes in just one URL. The second one takes in URL, takes in a parameter called user and password, which are both strings. But the third one, it is get connection, but it is taking in a URL, which is a string, and then the property, an object of the properties class. So it is the same method name, get connection, but it is taking in different parameters, and so that's what we call method overloading. So we are going to see how we connect to a database. Of course, we are saying that we use get connection to create a connection to the database, okay? And this get connection is part of the driver manager interface. So to create a connection object, we use driver manager.get connection method, which takes in, which is an overloaded method, meaning that you can choose one of them. You don't have to use all the 3. No, you choose which one you want to connect the database with. So if you choose the first one, then you pass in only the URL. If you use the second one, then you pass in the URL and then the properties, the property object. The third one is using 3 parameters, the URL, username, and password. Now the difference is, the first one, it is going to have what we call the URL to the database, including the credentials, which are basically the username, the user, and the password for your database. The second one, which is the properties object, now it is that prop object which will have the user and the password. But the third one, where you are passing in the URL, now the URL will not be having credentials, because now the credentials, you're passing them as parameters, the user and password. Okay, I think we can first look at what I've talked about, then we shall come back to this. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please go on.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Now, sir, my clarification is, when we carrying out this connection, you have to do it in Java, or you have to open up an editor, for example, MySQL or server, or MySQL server, or MySQL, and you pass on these methods.
It's what
For me, that's where my confusion is.
It's where we are going to right now. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's asking how do we do that, and that's basically where we are going to. So the first thing is to make sure that you create a project. Okay, I hope you can see my Eclipse. Do you?
Yes, I can.
So what we shall do is create a new project. Kato Dagas took you through how you create Java project. So if you're using Eclipse, file new project. This project you can call it maybe school management system. School management system. And so we click next, and then we finish, After that, we shall have our project here. So we can create a new file which we can call a new class, okay, which you create it under the source folder, and maybe you can call it student. Then we need the public static void main. We need the main method, of course, which is static and void. It has void as the return type. If you want, you can create packages. That's why you're seeing this, the use of default is discouraged. So if you want, you can come here and create a new package. So maybe you can say ER, or you can name it anything. I just want to make sure that it remains in the context of a school. Maybe you can call a package student ERP, okay, as the package. But you're saying that discouraged package name. They are saying by convention package name start with lowercase, so you need to follow that as well. Student ERP, and then you create the package. So it will be created here, and then after we can go ahead and create the package, our class within the package. So we shall go ahead and create our class, and the class we call it student. We need the public, we need the main method, and so I will check this, then we can click finish. So when you do that, this is automatically generated. I'm sure you're conversant with this. That's why we had to Douglas had to take you through the previous session. So we can test our program to make sure it runs very well. Just doing a simple test. We can say test passed, okay, and then we terminate, and when we execute, we can see test passed, meaning that our project is set up successfully. Now we are going to connect this application to our database. But if you remember, is that the first thing we do is to import the package, which is import java.sql, okay. So you first import that. But if you don't want, asterisk means that you're importing all the classes under this. If you don't want to do that, you can always import one at a time, maybe driver manager, okay. So now you see when you put double R, it shows you it's an error, meaning that that class or interface does not exist under that package. But driver manager, I'm sure it exists inside that. Now before you do anything, you need to import a driver. You need to import driver. Even before you import this, you need to import a driver. So now you will go online and download, because every database that you want to connect to has its own driver. If you want to connect to MySQL, it has its own driver. If you want to connect to Postgres as a database, it has its own driver. If you want to connect to SQL Server, it has its own driver, okay. So you can type here JDBC, then Darlington Asingwire, then you put dev.io. I published an article long time ago, so you can see it's here, how to connect MySQL database in Java. That article is even here. It was part of the the notes that I've sent you. If you click on this one directly, you can access it. If I click on this, I'll access that link, and it has it's teaching you how to you can connect your Java application to database. This was published 2021. So I encourage you to also keep writing online. When you write online, it's one way of also putting your knowledge out there. And so for example, what we are looking at today, it's an article that I published 4 years ago. as you can see, October 29th 2021. So if you come to this article, they will tell you to connect a Java application with MySQL database. You need MySQL connector.jar file, which is a jar file. So it's a driver. Okay, in this case I was specific because now the article was about MySQL, but the name would change if you're connecting to a different database. Now you click on this, it takes you to where you can, the link is there, if you check here or here, one of them. Now when you open the link, it takes you here, and therefore you can choose. If you're using Windows, it is selected by default. You can download the driver, the driver itself. Okay, for me I use Ubuntu, therefore this was specifically for Windows. I think this one is specific for Windows. You see, I can't select, meaning that if this one is specific for Windows, that's why I had to put two links, here or here. If you're using another operating system, you come here. Now this one allows you to choose a different actually the first one is for Windows, and this one for Linux based. That's why the other one was showing for, if I can open it as well, this one is specifically for Windows. You can't select any other apart from Windows. It's Windows. But this one helps you to choose. This is Linux based. Ubuntu, Debian, Linux Enterprise Server, Red Hat, all these are Linux based. So the two links, one caters for Windows. I think I'll edit to make sure that I become specific here for Windows and here for Linux. So if I'm using Ubuntu Linux, so when I select Ubuntu Linux, they show me different drivers. Okay, if of course Linux, Ubuntu has different versions. The current one I think it's 24. Then of course we have also 22. So you see that these guys only provide the jar file or the driver up to from 22 to 24. So I'm using Linux 24. If you do, yeah, I'm using Linux 24. So I will just, you come and download here. I had downloaded the driver. What I need to do is go to my downloads and just delete this so that you don't come confused, so that I can do it from scratch. So you download and then you say no thanks, just start my download, and then maybe I want to put it in downloads. I save it. Okay, once it is here, it's done. You guys can see what I'm doing, right? Just put, okay, good. So once you do that, you come to this, and it's here. Okay, it's here, so I can extract it. You extract here, and when you extract it, they form a folder. Oh, did it complete? Okay, then show files, and once it's done, now the folder comes here, and when you go into it, you find the file inside this. The directory might be different based on operating system, but you have to navigate those folders and find out where you have MySQL connector.jar. So this is the driver. So now this is the driver we've been talking about. So it's the one which will help you to connect your source code to the database. You have to first import it. The driver has a set of interfaces that will help you to connect to database. So now I will have to import this driver in my application. We go back to our Java project. So how do you import? You right click on the project, right click, Okay, you come here, click on the project first, then right click on build path. Yeah, it's here, build path, then you click configure build path. Once you do that, you click on libraries, then the module path, and then you click the button add external jars, the jar files. Okay, so you add that, and then you will find it here. It is already selected from this directory, but in case it's not selected, you have to navigate. For example, you do know that this is my folder of the driver that I downloaded. You know that it is inside here. Then you proceed until you find MySQL connector Java. The name might be different based on the version and what, but you just need to know that it has something like connector Java and then .jar. So you select that file, and when you select it, you apply and close. So at this point, if you go to reference the libraries, you find it here that your driver is inside the project MySQL connector.java, meaning that we've imported the driver. After we've done that, we can go ahead and import our package, because we said that the first thing we need to do is to import our package, which we said it is import java.mysql .sql, and you can use asterisk to refer to all the interfaces and classes within this package. But if you don't want to do that, if you want to be specific, you can specifically choose the classes you're interested in. I'm just going to show an example. Then after that, we said we need to register the driver. How did we say we register the driver? We use class.forename, if you remember, and then you put the driver name. Okay, for the driver name for MySQL, we said it is com then .mysql. If you refer to the notes that I've shared with you, then .jdbc .driver. Okay, so at this point you've registered your driver, but they are showing an error, which is possibly talking about, I believe, an exception. You see there is unhandled exception type, class not found exception. I don't know if Douglas took you through exception handling, but we use try catch block to handle exceptions. So whatever code that you expect to run or you want to execute has to go into a try. Then the catch block has source code that will help you in handling exceptions. So you say catch, then you say maybe exception, and maybe you say in case it gets an exception, you can print out the exception to understand caught or encountered exception, caught exception. Therefore use plus, then you use e. This can be anything, it's not a must be. You can even use ex, just it's the object name. When you say ex, just an object name for this class exception. So you can say ex dot get message to, you see all these I don't know if you are taught, if Douglas took you through exception handling, but get message will help you to understand more about the exception that has been caught by your program. Okay, then you can see now it's not showing any error. Of course, if we run, we don't expect anything because we are not doing anything. Now we said that after registering the driver, you have to establish a connection. How do you establish a connection? We saw get connection, a method which is on the driver interface. So you create it's a connection object. You create it using driver manager, which creates a connection object. So you can say connection, this class comes from this. If I want, I can say actually a connection here, meaning that it is importing specifically that class. Then when I say driver manager, remember that we are saying driver manager.get connection. Okay, and then you see it has imported itself here again, but it is coming from SQL package, driver manager.sql. So if you use the asterisk, it means you are importing everything that is within here. If we specify connection and driver manager, we are stating specifically what we want, which interfaces or classes we are interested in from this package. So here we said we have two approaches. One, or we said this method is overloaded. One is where you pass in only one URL, the URL itself that connects to your database. Secondly, you have to, if you remember, you can use the props object. The third method is where you pass in the URL and then you pass in the username for your database and then the password. So I'm going to start with the one for where we look at only the URL. So for the URL, if I'm connecting the one that is on my localhost, so you say JDBC, then :, then you specify localhost. If you want, you can declare it as a string, then you pass it as a URL. So you can say string db URL, then you put your string here, so that when you come here, you put URL here. This must be a capital. So the string that will help me to connect my, to the database.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, your screen is static. You are not viewing. It's not moving. What you are typing. I don't know whether it's my connection or.
Let your colleagues confirm. Can you guys see my IDE Eclipse?
Especially when you're typing.
Other colleagues are saying it's okay, meaning that it is just an issue on your end, Titus.
Oh, okay, sir. Let me try.
Okay, so JDBC stroke localhost, because the database that I'm trying to connect to is on my on my localhost. Then of course MySQL, I'm trying to connect to MySQL, and my port on which MySQL runs on my machine is that is normally the default MySQL port. And then after you put the database name. So in my database I have this is my SQL database. So I have different databases, and one of them is the school. This is the school database, which has some tables, the students and users. So my database that I want to connect to is school. So that's why I am prefixing school here, okay? Stroke school. Then if you want to use the first approach, which is let me take you back. The first method, okay, this one, where you are passing only the URL and nothing else, then you must pass in the username and password within that URL. So how do you do that? You will say, you put the question mark, then you put user. Now the user represents the username for your database. The one for testing that I use is root, and then you put the password. Use and, of course, if you have very many variables that you're passing in a URL, I'm sure you're very familiar with that. Then password, I'm using root at 123 as my default password for root for testing. So now at this point you have formed a URL that will help you to connect to the database. So the approach that I've used here is this, it's this one, where I'm only passing the URL. So at that point we should be able to connect to the database. Now we can write a simple statement to say system.out.println database connection established successfully. Okay, then we terminate. So at this point we are good in terms of connecting this program to the database which I've shown you. So if we run, we should be able to say a message, okay, no suitable driver found. So now meaning that we have an error, basically no suitable, and you can see that this has been thrown from the exception. You see quote exception, because we put quote exception here. If I put something like this, you will find that quote exception and then it adds this, meaning that the catch broke. is the one which has helped us in catching the exception. So meaning that the driver has not been detected in our program. So we can find out what could be the issue. Maybe it could be the name or no suitable driver found for this. I hope it's not a URL. We're supposed to use yes, it's a URL. We are missing JDBC, then full colon. After here you have to specify that it's MySQL, okay? That JDBC, then full colon MySQL, then full colon you put the IP. Yeah? So here you're specifying the database, that's JDBC, then MySQL. I'm trying to connect to MySQL, then here you put the address for your database, which is that. So if we run, we should be able to get database connection established success-free. Okay, as you can see on my console, that database connection established what? Successfully. Now, if we put, maybe let's put like a database that does not exist. I've added another error, and I don't have a school that ends with error in my database. If you look at this, I don't have a database called school, you know, with a double error. So there we should be able to see a message showing that we are unable to connect to the database. We should not be able to have this message because this database does not exist. So if you connect this, should be able to get an error that you can see unknown database school with double error, meaning that our program is now physically communicating with our MySQL database. That's why it has been able to detect there is no database this, because if you go to my database, there's nothing, there's no database called school. For example, if I put, for example, maybe hotel, we have a database. I have a database called hotel. If I put hotel here, then it should be successful because the database is there. So as you can see, database connection established successfully. Now, it's not just the database name that can cause an error. If you put in wrong credentials, okay? For example, if I put another T on the user, I don't have the user root with double T that is using my database. So I should have something like access denied, or something like that, telling me that I can't access the database with this username and password because there is no user that is accessing my database using this name. So let's run and see. So you can see caught exception, access denied for this user, because this user is not registered as amongst those usernames that must access my configured MySQL database. Some of you, your databases are always accessed by anything, but it's not good. If I put 4, meaning that I've changed my password root at 124, which is the incorrect database, then I should not have access as well. So if I do that, I should also have an error or an exception saying access denied. I can see access denied for user root at localhost using password yes, meaning that I've used the wrong password. But if I put the correct password, which is 3, then I get my message back that database connection established successfully, meaning that now our program, our class, for example, this program is now communicating with the database, and therefore you can go ahead and write queries, select maybe information from a specific table, write an insert query. You go ahead and execute update a table, you go ahead and delete information. So I'm going to show you another approach that we looked at. This one was only taking in the URL. What about the one that is taking in username as password as parameters? You can choose any of these. So the first one, I demonstrated how to use the first one. Now I'm going to show you the third one, where you pass in the URL, the username, and then the password. The user and the password are your database credentials. If you're going to access your database, which username and password do you use? So in our program, this one, we concatenated the credentials, the user and the password as part of the URL. Okay, if I remove this, if have removed them, we should not be able to access because there are no credentials. There are no what? You can see access denied for Darlington, because I think that's the default account for my MySQL. Okay, password no, meaning that I've not supplied password. That's why you're saying password no. So if you want to use this approach of the third method where you pass in the URL, username and password, then you don't concatenate the user and the password as part of the URL, but you pass them as parameters. So I can say string user, you say it is root, then I say string password. Essentially, for people who know about environment variables, you would be capturing username and password because you can't store them like here. Otherwise, someone, if it's a live application, people will steal your database connections and they'll be able to log in. So it is telling us that after here we should put user and then password. Okay, which are the values that we've put here? User is root, password is this. So we've used the second method where we're saying the get connection that takes in the URL, the username and then password. Now if we execute this, we should be successful. As you can see, database connection established successfully. If we put a wrong password, then we should expect we should have an exception. So you can see access denied for root, password yes, meaning that the password is wrong. Okay, so if we do that, now it should be successful. And if we change the username, maybe we call it roots, and I don't have database user called roots, then should also fail. And that's why we have that exception, access denied for user called roots. But if we put a correct username and then you execute, meaning that we should be successful. So that is the second method, where you pass in username and password as part of the parameters to the get connection. Now we go to the last one, where we are passing in the URL but the properties object. Now we have the object. This one takes in 1, which you've seen. This one takes in 3, but now the third one takes in the properties object. So there are 2, URL and then the properties object. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to create the properties object, and we get it in a package called java.util. So java.util then .properties. Not utils, not util. Utils then properties. Am I missing out something? Oh no, should be, I think it's util, not utils. So that's why we have the properties class. So we can instantiate that to instantiate. Instantiation means creating an object. So we create properties, say properties, then we create prop, any object, the object name, you can name it anything, then you say new.properties. So in this case we are instantiating, we are creating an object for this class called properties. So we can set user and the password through this object. So we can say prop.set property. So you set property, in this case user, the key is user, and then the user is user, which is this one. If you don't want to do this, you can get rid of this, and you put the username for your database, then you say prop.set property, then you put password, and then you put your DB password, which is root at 123, and then you terminate. And then this will change, because that method get connection, the third one we are looking at, takes in the URL, which is this, and then the properties object, which is this. So in this case we have to put in the prop object, meaning that the username and password for the database has they have been set through the props object. We are saying set property, set user, then it is this password, it is this. So after this, you should be able to execute and get database connection successful. So you choose one of them, okay? I took time to show you that you can choose one of them, and you can see it's successful. If you change the password, maybe it roots, then you have to get exception, meaning that you are unable to connect to your database. So that's why it has failed. If you put a wrong password as well, then it should also fail because it's a wrong password. That's why that they're showing us access denied for root using password yes. But if we put a correct password for our database and then we re-execute this, then we should be able to get a success message, or a message that shows that our database connection has been established successfully. I would want to stop here. Next time, or you want more? We can, if we want, we can proceed from here next time. Yes, Lugun, please go on.
Yes, sir. I don't know. I don't know if because I'm behind or because I'm not understanding very well. But I don't know. I wanted to know how to get those password and user the way you're getting root that password. I don't know where you're getting them.
Okay, when you install MySQL, you can always configure those credentials. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I will task one of your colleagues, Douglas or Simon, to record a video for you. Or if there is anyone who knows, of course I know personally, but because of time, I would want everyone to see it live. So I want to record a video recorded on that. So if there is someone who will volunteer amongst you to record the session for us on how do you set up MySQL database on a computer, and how do you configure credentials like username and password, then I would be glad to have you on board record that session for your colleagues. So Rigun, I hope I've addressed your question.
Yeah. And another question, sir.
Yes.
And another question is, I was just seeing you entering. I don't know if that's SQL of students, if you created it before or just is here in class, because there is a time I was not around.
Yes, you will follow this video. That's how we created that student class. You will follow and see how we created. You a late comer, Rigun. Hopefully next time you can join a little bit earlier. Make sure you. That's why I always emphasize, please join the call 11 sharp. Me, I don't waste time. So make sure next time you come early so that you follow from the start. But good enough, the session is recorded for you. Be able to follow up and see what we did.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Are you going to teach how to encrypt username? There is no need to encrypt a username. You only need to encrypt password. We will show that, no problem.
Oh, that is good.
That was Katumba
Thank
asking. Okay, good. Yes, James, please go on. I see your hand raised up, so please go on and ask.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Now, for me, I have just a simple complaint. You're too fast somewhere, somehow. I was trying to note down some key points,
Yes.
but you're faster.
Okay, I will try to reduce the speed, but in case you are unable to follow up some things good enough, this session is recorded after this session to be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to access. But going forward, I'll see how I can slow down my speed.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, anyone else? We can go ahead and look at one more example of this, then we start from there next time. Now, we go back to our notes a bit. So if you look at now under JDBC we have different interfaces. One is called prepared statement, another one is called statement, another one is called callable statement. Now these statements help us in executing our SQL commands or SQL queries, but some can be used for the same thing, but others are meant for specific actions. Now for statement as an interface, it is general purpose access to your database, meaning that it's, you know, when say general purpose, but the limitation with statement as an interface is that it cannot accept parameters, dynamic ones. You can hard-code values, but it does not accept input parameters. For example, if you want, if you're going to register a student and you want these values to be captured from the user keyboard or from the user, then you can't use statement, because statement does not accept dynamic values or parameters. The statement that allows you to input values is prepared statement. Is the one that accepts input parameters at runtime. So this is more like compile time and then runtime. Static SQL queries. Why you're seeing static SQL queries is why you had code values. Even for the name of the user that you're going to register, you had code them within a string. But for prepared statement, if you want to capture values from the keyboard, then it's the statement that you have to use. For codable statement, it is used when you're dealing with stored procedures. I believe you've heard of stored procedures. I think I will get a volunteer, someone who is willing to mentor your colleagues to create for us a session on how do you create MySQL databases, how do you create different user accounts on MySQL, within your SQL databases, how do you create stored procedures and execute them, how do you create MySQL functions. So anyone who is familiar with them, or if you take time and learn them in like 2 days, you can reach out and I give you that opportunity. Codable interface, as I've said, is used when you want to execute or access stored procedures or MySQL functions. Now we look at how we instantiate, how we create objects for statement interface. One, you say statement, then object name, then you use the DB connection. Remember, we created the DB connection when we said connection, then con. Now the con is the object name. You can name it anything. Where we use then driver manager.get connection. So in other words, what I'm saying is, where you're seeing DB connection name here, we are trying to mean this. It is this one. Okay, in this case I named it con, but you can even name it connection if you want. Okay, you can name it anything, or if I want I can say underscore con. You can name it anything, it's just an object. So we are saying that, I'm saying that you use the connection object. Please pay attention here, because I'm going to first take you through the notes, then we go there and code. So that's how you use create statement. Okay, use create statement. For prepared statement interface, you create a connection object, you create an object name, you say prepared statement, then object name, then you use the other connection, then you say prepare statement. This one for statement says create statement. For prepared statement says prepare statement, and it takes in a URL, which is a string, okay, which is basically the SQL statement that you're trying to execute. Codable statement, it takes in a string where you code in your procedure, So there are several methods that you can use on the statement interface. There's what we call execute. Now execute takes in a string, which is a query that you're trying to execute. Then there is execute query, which does not take in parameters. Then there is execute update, which takes in, a string, and it is the SQL statement they're trying to execute. And then there is execute batch. If you have multiple SQL statements that you want to execute, then there you use a method called execute batch. Now, if you look at this, for example, we're saying that execute update, the explanations are here. For execute update, if you want to insert, update, or delete, which is DDL statements, then you use execute update. You want to insert. Do you want to insert the database? Do you want to insert a table? Do you want to update a date? Then you use execute update. Then execute a query, just like this, we're saying executes given SQL queries, which returns the result set. This normally is used when you're trying to fetch records, because you can see the return type is result set. Result set is basically a group, the collection of columns returned from that table. So is execute query. And so we assume we want to create a new database. Want to create a new database? You can use statement interface. Why? Because the static, you're going to hard code the database name, and once you do that, of course, we saw how to create the statement, the object statement interface, then the object name, then you use the connection name, then dot create statement, then you write your query, the one you want to execute, then you can use statement, then execute update. So we can look at an example. Assume we want to create a new database. Okay, so I can comment out this, and we said you use the statement interface for static queries. Static queries means that they do not involve dynamic values. So you use statement interface, then the object name. The reason as to why it is putting this is because we've not imported it. Okay, that's why. So we import it also in through this package. So you say import java.sql.statement. This is SQL. Okay, so you see even here the error is gone. Then you use the object name, which is this. I can make it con. So I say con, then dot create statement. Remember, this is the syntax we said. If you go back to our notes here, for the statement object, it is statement object name. Okay, statement object name, then connection object, which is con, then dot create what statement. Now if we want to maybe create a new database, we use the statement object, which is this, and then we say dot execute update, which takes in a string, you can see. So in this case, the string is basically the SQL query that you want to execute, which can be create database academy, can call it pivot. Do I have that database there? We don't. We have coding academy, something like this. So this one already exists. So we can say academy DB. Okay, I'm going to call it academy DB. Then after this, you can maybe say system.out.println. You say database created successfully, then you terminate. So if we execute this program, then we should have our database created inside here. Once we refresh, we shall be able to see it listed among these databases. We've called it academy DB. Let's go ahead and execute our program and see. If we execute, it runs, and then they say database created successfully. If you come and you check in our databases, you refresh, you can see the database is here, academy DB. I hope everyone has seen that. Okay, we have dynamically created this table, sorry, this database using our source code or our Java program. So that's one thing to note. I believe you have understood that. Now going forward, we are going to use this database that we've created. So instead of school, now here I'm going to put the Academy DB so that I can create tables and all that. So in this case, I will comment out this since I've created the database. So executing it, you can't create the database twice. They will show you database already exists. So now we've seen how to create a database. We can proceed and be able to create something else. Maybe it could be a table, it could be anything that we want to create. So we shall go ahead and create a table within this database that we've created, this Academy DB. And if you go to this, we don't have any tables yet. No, it's actually Academy DB. I believe we don't have any tables yet. That's why you see nothing listed. Okay, we don't have anything. So we shall create a table here. We shall create a table using our program. So we shall say, first of all, we shall create a query for you guys. If I feel like someone needs to, just like I advised, to create a session on how to create tables, those commands. I believe you guys are familiar. If you're not, take time to look through. If I get someone, they will be able to create that for you. Create table, query. Okay, can create my string. Here it can be anything. I'm just giving it a name. I can say query. Okay, this query that I want is going to create table. Maybe I want a table to be called students. So you say create table called students, and it is going to have maybe ID, which is an int, and primary key, and then auto increment. This is just SQL. Okay, this is just SQL, which I'm sure I know some of you don't know, but it's just purely SQL commands. Then first, you can put first name, and this first name can be varchar. Varchar means a string. Then we give it 50 as maximum. Then we also say last name, we say varchar, and maybe also 50. And we can say maybe lastly address. Okay, say varchar, maybe 30. Next, maybe you can say age, which is an int. Okay, and maybe can say maybe 50. That even 15 is too much. Maybe you can say 5. So yeah, so meaning that this table that we're going to create could be students with ID, which will be primary key and auto increment. We'll have first name, we also have last name, we also have address, and then age. So after we've done that, we can go ahead and execute our query. So we can use the statement, because this is static in a sense that what we've created, this query does not have dynamic values, so it's okay. We can go ahead and use the statement interface. You would not use the statement interface if you're capturing maybe values from keyboard. There you would have to use prepared statement, but we can use statement. So shall they say statement dot execute you can use, in this case you can use also execute, because execute also takes in the query. So it's there as well. You can use execute, update, or execute. So in this case, the query is here, which is this one. Then we are saying execute statement, which is this object, then dot execute, which is going to execute our query. And then after here we can say system dot out dot print line. Then we say table students created successfully. Okay, you see that? Now if we execute this program, we should be able to have a table inside our database that we've used. Remember, we've changed in the connection to use this database. Whatever database you put here is where your table will be created. It means that you've chosen to use this database to where to perform your operations of creating tables, of creating, stored procedures or fetching, all that. But in this case, so we've chosen to use the Academy DB, which we created via these commands. So if we run, then we should be able to have students as a table inside here with those columns that we've put. So we execute and see. Okay. So we are saying we have an error in our syntax. Okay. And the error is we opened this bracket, this one, but it's not closed. So we can close it. So if there's an error, you see, that's the importance of using the catch block. Quote exception, you have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual MySQL version etc. It is because I had forgotten that bracket. Now if we execute, should be able to see table students created successfully. As you can see, they are telling us table students created successfully. If you go and check our table, if I refresh this database, refresh, and then I click here, you see that we have our table students here. And when I click to view it, you see we have ID, which we created, then first name, last name, address, and age, which are the columns that we've created via our command here: ID, first name, last name, and then address. Okay, so that's how you create a table. Next, we can look at how do we insert values. For example, if I want to insert values in our table, I want to insert a student, what do we do? So we can also, now I'm going to comment out this. Since it is done, we can't create a table twice, you will get an error. So for purposes, I'll just comment out. Now we can create a query that is going to help us insert a specific student, maybe underscore query. You don't have to make it query. You can say some of you will cram insert query, which I don't want. Then you write a command for inserting into students. So I can say insert into table called students. Then I specify the name, the values that I want to insert. ID is auto increment, meaning I don't have to state it. So we have first name, we have last name, we have address, all those were mandatory. Then we have age. Then after this, you save values, you put values. Okay. So I can say, I can enter who is there. First name maybe Douglas. Last name maybe Kato. Then address maybe Kampala. Then age maybe 19. Okay, so 19 of course is not in quotation because it's a number. So there we have created a table. We have created a query to insert into students, first name, last name, address, and then age. Then you save values. You put corresponding values. You started with what? First name. So the first name is Douglas. Last name is Kato. Address is Kampala. Age 19. Then you can go ahead and execute this statement. I'm going to still use statement interface because the values are hard coded. If we are going to capture the values of these students from keyboard, from the user, we would not use the statement interface because that is dynamic information. So we will have to use the prepared statement, and hopefully we can look at that in the next session. So we are going to execute this statement of insert. So we shall say statement.execute, and our query is insert query. Then we terminate. Then we can just write a simple statement to show that it's successful. Say student Kato has been registered successfully. Okay, then we terminate. So at this point, if we run our program, we should have Kato in our database. Now if we refresh here, there is nothing, meaning that the table is empty. But if we insert, then we should have Kato Douglas recorded in our program. So if we execute, we get a message, student Kato has been registered successfully. Now if we refresh the table, realize that now there is Kato. Okay, there is Kato who? Douglas Kato, and you can see his records are in the database. We can try to change the details here and put Simon Dungu. Maybe he stays in Mukono. Maybe he is 18. Okay, so if we execute this, then we should also have Simon in the database. So if you execute, and this case should have changed to Kato, okay, to Simon, the message, so that this message can change. But nonetheless, we should have Simon recorded. So you can see Simon Dungu Mukono, he is in our table. Okay, so we can comment out that now that you've learned how to insert, how can we fetch these students from the database? So now we write a query. We can say select query. We shall select all from our table, which is students. Okay, you write that query for selecting from students. Then after that, we have to get these records. Now if you followed here very well, I hope you guys can you still guys see? If you followed here very well, we said that the method that helps you to execute the given SQL queries, which returns a single result set object. So in this case, if you want to fetch records, use execute query, and it returns the result set as an object. So if it returns the result set object, is the result set is part of the Java SQL. So you say .sql, then .result set. Okay, this must be small j. Then here we shall instantiate result set, maybe you call it rs. Then we use the statement object, then .execute query, and the query that we are executing is this select query. Now at this point, when this object will be having rows from this table, so we can iterate to display the information. So you can say while rs.next till the next column, then we can get the details. One, we have first name, so you can either use the object which is rs, then .get string. If it is a string, the column, then you put the column. What is the column? It is the first name from the database. Okay, this should be capital. Then I will duplicate this for the rest of the strings. So here I will say last name, and of course the column name in the database is last name. If I don't want you to cram, let me use f name so that you know these are variables. Then here you just put column names. Then here you can say add, maybe I can say from where, so that you don't confuse it. Then here you put the column name is address. Then another one is an integer, which is basically age. Okay, so age, I can say rs. Since it is an integer, in this case you don't use get string, you use get int, because in the database our column is is an integer. So here we'd have to capture each, and we are getting details from each column. Yeah. You can actually, if you want, you can call these rows. You say rows, then you say or row, whatever you want to call it. I'm just simplifying it using, it's an object name. I'm just showing you that you can use any object. You don't necessarily have to use mine rs. So we can go ahead and print the details of this student. So we can say system.out.println, and then you put, you know, the details of this person. So you can say name, in this case it's first name. Okay, so we can concatenate these values. Can say first name, no, we are using f name because it's the variable. Then we put last name, then we say is or comes from. Okay, then we put where they come from, which is from where, that is the variable that we are using. And then we say this is error name. This is our variable that we are using, is error name. Comes from where, which will be the address. And you can say and is plus age, then years old. So there we are trying to, this age is basically underscore because I named it underscore. So if we run this, should have, they are going to capture the first name, maybe Kato Douglas, comes maybe from whatever address we've put, and is whatever age we've put in the database, then years old. If you want to just, if you don't want to just create a statement like this, you print basically their details. So if you run this, you shall have all of them. So you see Douglas Kato comes from Kampala and is 19 years old. Dung Simon comes from Mukono and is 18 years old, which is basically the information that we have here. Douglas Kato comes from Kampala and is 19 years old. Simon Dungu comes from Mukono and is 18 years old. So that's basically what we've done here. It's not a must that you must create a statement like mine. You can just print so I mean, make sure that you guys don't cram. I can create something like this, but I need to make sure that there is space between these variables, and I just put this, and for years I just do this and then remove this. Okay, so if I run, it will not be statement but just their information. So if I run, you will find that have Kato Douglas Kampala 19, Simon Dungu Mukono 18, which is basically the information that we have here. Please allow me stop from here unless you have any questions. Any questions? Any questions on what we've looked at? Yes, Marvin.
Hello?
I can hear you, Marvin.
Yes, so I was asking, in your Eclipse, I've been seeing that you're importing like individual packages, is it?
Yes.
Like java.sql, and then you add something else. So you said you can import everything at once.
Yes, you can do this actually. You do this, and yeah, you see no error still in your program.
Yes, so my question is, does that have an impact on the application? Like, does it increase the size?
Of course, the best way is you would want to only import what you're going to use. Why would I import what I don't want to use? So yeah, that's it. Always in your applications, always import what you need to use. Don't import everything.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I took this approach. Yeah.
Okay.
Any more questions, or we can conclude from here? Okay, since there are no more questions,